People tend to believe the most dangerous person in the room is the one with the highest intelligence, the fastest thinker, the person who sees the solution before everyone else even understands the problem. And because of that belief, countless people quietly spend their lives feeling intellectually inferior, assuming they could never compete with minds that seem naturally gifted. But intelligence alone has never guaranteed clarity, self-control, or influence. Some of the smartest individuals collapse under pressure because emotion takes control the moment life becomes uncomfortable. Meanwhile, calmer minds quietly shape situations without needing to prove anything at all. Stoicism understood this centuries ago. A disturbed mind becomes predictable, and predictable people are easy to influence. A person who cannot control emotion eventually becomes controlled by it. That is why real mental strength is not built through speed of thought alone, but through stillness under pressure, clarity inside confusion, and the ability to remain steady while everyone else reacts impulsively. The disciplined mind moves differently. It pauses before reacting. It observes before speaking. It remains calm while others lose themselves emotionally. And something strange begins happening once the mind develops that kind of discipline. Conversations change, pressure changes, even silence begins carrying weight. Because calm minds notice what reactive minds miss. They see the emotional patterns hidden beneath words, the insecurity beneath confidence, the tension beneath appearance. And over time, that awareness creates a quiet kind of strength that cannot be easily manipulated, pressured, or shaken by the noise of the world around it. Most people enter conversations already carrying an invisible weight on their shoulders. Before anyone even speaks, the mind has already begun preparing for conflict. It rehearses responses, defends opinions, and searches for ways to appear intelligent, composed, and impossible to challenge. Then someone across the room speaks with confidence, and suddenly the body reacts as if danger has appeared. Breathing changes, thoughts become rushed, attention narrows. In that moment, the person is no longer listening carefully. They are protecting an image of themselves they fear might collapse under scrutiny. This is why so many interactions become exhausting without anyone fully understanding why. The mind quietly transforms ordinary conversation into competition, and competition creates tension long before any real conflict begins. Stoic thinkers understood that suffering often begins inside interpretation rather than reality itself. Confidence becomes interpreted as superiority. Disagreement becomes interpreted as attack. Intelligence becomes interpreted as threat. Once that emotional pressure takes hold, clarity disappears. People interrupt too quickly. They explain too much. They react to imagined judgment instead of observing what is truly happening in front of them. But a disciplined mind approaches interaction differently. Instead of entering conversations trying to prove intelligence, it enters trying to understand reality clearly. That small shift changes everything. The need to impress begins fading, and observation becomes sharper. The mind notices pauses between words, small changes in tone, forced confidence hiding insecurity, irritation concealed beneath politeness. Most people focus so heavily on what they want to say next that they completely miss these details. Calm attention uncovers them naturally. And once observation becomes stronger than reaction, conversations stop feeling like battles that need to be won. They begin feeling more like windows into the emotional state of another human being. That is why composed individuals often seem strangely difficult to influence. But once awareness deepens, automatic behavior slowly loses its power. A person who observes carefully can still feel emotion without becoming directed by it. That distinction changes the entire atmosphere of human interaction. People reveal themselves most clearly when they believe nobody is paying close attention. Someone speaks too loudly because insecurity is hiding beneath confidence. Another person constantly interrupts because silence makes them uncomfortable. Others over-explain simple ideas because they are desperate to appear intelligent. None of these behaviors need harsh judgment. They simply need understanding. Calm observation removes unnecessary emotional involvement and replaces it with insight. Genuine confidence rarely announces itself loudly. People who truly trust themselves usually feel no urgency to prove superiority in every interaction. They are comfortable letting others speak. Comfortable letting silence appear naturally. Comfortable admitting uncertainty when uncertainty exists. That calmness often carries more influence than aggressive intelligence ever could, because it changes the emotional atmosphere around them. Others begin slowing down unconsciously. Conversations become steadier. Emotional chaos loses momentum in the presence of someone who remains internally balanced. And in a world where most people are constantly distracted by appearances, that clarity becomes increasingly valuable. Many individuals spend years learning how to sound persuasive while never learning how to remain emotionally steady. They become skilled at presentation but weak in self-control. The problem is that pressure eventually exposes this imbalance. A person may appear confident when conditions feel comfortable, yet collapse internally the moment criticism or rejection arrives unexpectedly. Calm observation notices these fractures quickly, not to encourage arrogance, but to remind the mind that emotional discipline creates a deeper form of stability than performance ever can. Over time, this changes the way interactions feel entirely. You stop entering rooms searching for validation. You enter with curiosity instead, and curiosity keeps the mind open while insecurity quietly blinds it. The quieter the ego becomes, the easier it is to notice the hidden emotional currents shaping every interaction around you. And once observation becomes stronger than reaction, time itself begins feeling different inside the mind. Most people live trapped inside immediate emotion. A message appears on their phone and they feel pressure to respond instantly. Someone disagrees with them and they rush to defend themselves before fully understanding what was even said. An opportunity appears and excitement pushes them forward so quickly that they never stop to examine where that path actually leads. Their attention becomes chained to impulse. Every feeling demands action. Every emotion demands expression. Because of that, decisions are often controlled by temporary states people mistake for permanent truth. This is why so many individuals later regret words that once felt completely justified in the moment. Emotion narrows perception. It convinces the mind that the present feeling is all that matters, while quietly hiding the long-term consequences waiting further ahead. A disciplined mind learns to slow this process down, not through suppression, but through awareness. Stoic thinkers understood that emotions themselves are not the enemy. The danger appears when emotion takes control before reason has time to examine reality clearly. Anger creates momentum. Fear creates momentum. Pride creates momentum. They push behavior toward immediate reaction because immediate reaction feels emotionally relieving. Yet relief and wisdom are rarely the same thing. Some of the worst decisions people make arrive during moments when acting quickly feels emotionally satisfying. A person sends the angry message, ends the relationship impulsively, accepts an opportunity without reflection, publicly defends their ego over something insignificant. For a brief moment, the reaction feels powerful. Then time passes, clarity returns, and the cost slowly becomes visible. One emotional moment begins shaping months or years of consequences that never needed to exist in the first place. This is why calm thinking creates such a quiet advantage in life. A person who can pause before reacting sees possibilities emotionally reactive people completely miss. That pause may only last a few seconds externally, yet internally it changes the direction of thought entirely. Instead of asking how to satisfy emotion immediately, the disciplined mind asks where each choice eventually leads. Most people focus on winning the current moment. Calm minds focus on protecting long-term clarity. That difference changes everything because the future often belongs to those who can resist temporary emotional satisfaction. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." There are arguments that destroy years of trust simply because neither person was willing to step back for 1 minute and think beyond immediate pride. There are opportunities ruined because impatience disguised itself as confidence. There are relationships damaged by words spoken during emotional storms that lasted only minutes but created wounds lasting years. The strange thing is that impulsive behavior often feels intelligent while it is happening. Emotion gives certainty to reactions that have not been examined carefully. A person becomes convinced they are simply being honest, decisive, or strong, when in reality they are being directed by temporary internal pressure. Stoic discipline interrupts this illusion. It teaches the mind to question emotional urgency before obeying it. Not every feeling deserves expression. Not every thought deserves action. Some emotions are simply passing weather inside the mind, intense for a moment and gone shortly afterward. Yet many people build entire lives around reacting to those temporary storms. They chase emotional relief so consistently that they never develop the ability to endure discomfort long enough for wisdom to emerge naturally. And once someone develops that kind of discipline, manipulation becomes far more difficult. Emotionally reactive people are easy to influence because their behavior can be predicted through pressure. Trigger fear and they lose perspective. Push the ego and they react impulsively. Create urgency and they abandon careful thinking. But a disciplined mind does not move automatically simply because emotion appears. Over time, situations that once felt overwhelming begin losing their emotional grip because the mind no longer treats every feeling as a command that must be obeyed immediately. Space appears between emotion and action, and inside that space, freedom begins forming quietly. If the pursuit of clarity, emotional discipline, and inner control speaks to something deeper within you, subscribe and continue walking this path forward, not for empty motivation or noise, but for the kind of understanding that slowly changes the way the mind sees the world, responds to pressure, and moves through life with greater awareness. A disciplined mind learns to slow this process down, not through suppression, but through awareness. Stoic thinkers understood that emotions themselves are not the enemy. The danger appears when emotion takes control before reason has time to examine reality clearly. Anger, excitement, fear, pride, and frustration all create momentum inside the mind. They push behavior toward immediate reaction because immediate reaction feels relieving. Yet relief and wisdom are rarely the same thing. Some of the worst decisions people make arrive during moments when acting quickly feels emotionally satisfying. A person sends the angry message, ends the relationship impulsively, accepts an offer without reflection, publicly defends their ego over something insignificant. For a brief moment, the reaction feels powerful. Then time passes, clarity returns, and the cost slowly becomes visible. One emotional moment begins shaping months or even years of consequences that never needed to exist in the first place. This is why calm thinking creates such a quiet advantage in life. A person who can pause before reacting sees possibilities that emotionally reactive people completely miss. That pause may only last a few seconds externally, yet internally it changes the direction of thought entirely. Instead of asking how to satisfy emotion immediately, the disciplined mind asks where each choice eventually leads. That single shift creates enormous psychological distance between impulsive people and reflective ones. Most individuals are trying to win the current moment. They want to feel correct, respected, admired, or emotionally validated right now. But calm minds understand that protecting long-term clarity matters far more than temporary emotional victory. There are arguments that destroy trust permanently simply because neither person was willing to step back for 1 minute and think beyond immediate pride. There are opportunities ruined because impatience disguised itself as confidence. There are relationships damaged by words spoken during emotional storms that lasted only minutes but left scars lasting years. This discomfort explains why many people sabotage themselves repeatedly without understanding the deeper reason. Waiting feels weak to them. Reflection feels passive. Silence feels like surrender. So they react quickly in order to regain emotional certainty, even when that certainty leads them directly into mistakes they could have avoided with a little restraint. Calm people are often misunderstood because of this. Others mistake patience for hesitation or softness because modern culture praises speed constantly. Faster responses, faster decisions, faster opinions. Yet some of the strongest decisions are made slowly. The mind becomes clearer when it is not rushing to escape discomfort. And once clarity improves, manipulation becomes far more difficult. Emotionally reactive people are easy to influence because their behavior can be predicted through pressure. Push their ego and they react, trigger fear and they lose perspective, create urgency and they abandon careful thinking. But a disciplined mind does not move automatically simply because emotion appears. Over time, this changes the entire relationship a person has with life. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin losing their emotional grip because the mind no longer treats every feeling as a command that must be obeyed immediately. Space appears between emotion and action. That space becomes one of the most valuable forms of inner freedom a person can develop. As Epictetus observed, no man is free who is not master of himself. It allows someone to think beyond the current moment and position themselves for outcomes reactive people never see coming because they are too distracted by temporary emotional noise. People who master this discipline rarely appear, yet their calmness changes the direction of situations quietly. They are interested in proving themselves and more interested in clarity. That is why they recover from pressure than others. Their decisions are not chained to emotional states. They can endure discomfort without collapsing into reaction, and that ability gives them an advantage that cannot be seen at first glance. While others are trapped inside the emotion of the moment, they are thinking steps beyond it carefully. But perhaps the greatest distraction a person can face is not noise from the outside world, but emotional instability within themselves. Most people reveal their inner state constantly without noticing it. Their voice changes slightly when they feel insecure. Their expression tightens when they feel challenged. Their posture shifts the moment they begin doubting themselves. Long before words communicate anything meaningful, emotion is already speaking through behavior. This is why emotionally reactive people often feel strangely exposed in difficult conversations. They may believe they are hiding frustration, fear, or anxiety, yet the body quietly reveals what the mind is trying to conceal. And once another person senses those emotional patterns, influence becomes much easier than most people realize. Someone who can predict your emotional reactions can often predict your behavior as well. Think about two individuals receiving criticism in the exact same moment. One reacts instantly. Their voice becomes defensive. They begin explaining themselves rapidly, searching for ways to recover control of the situation. Even if their words sound reasonable, the emotional urgency beneath them changes how they are perceived. The other person remains composed. They listen fully before speaking. Their breathing stays steady. Their expression changes very little. They are not emotionally frozen. They are simply not allowing the criticism to dictate the direction of their behavior. That calmness creates uncertainty inside the other person. Aggressive individuals often expect emotional resistance because resistance confirms their influence. But when frustration fails to produce visible reaction, the dynamic shifts. The emotionally reactive person begins exposing more of themselves, while the composed person continues observing clearly. This is one of the least understood forms of psychological influence. Silence, patience, and emotional steadiness often shape interactions more powerfully than forceful speech ever could. Many people assume influence belongs to the loudest voice or the fastest thinker, yet emotional control quietly changes the emotional temperature of an entire room. When one person remains calm during tension, others begin adjusting themselves unconsciously around that calmness. The pace of conversation slows slightly, emotional intensity weakens, reactions lose momentum. This happens because human beings constantly respond to emotional signals from one another, even when they are unaware of it consciously. A stable presence affects unstable environments in subtle ways. That influence does not need to announce itself loudly because people feel it instinctively. Emotionally reactive individuals rarely notice how predictable they become over time. Praise controls them. Criticism controls them. Attention controls them. Disapproval controls them. Their emotional state changes according to whatever pressure is applied externally, which means their behavior can be guided by anyone skilled enough to trigger those reactions intentionally. This is why calm people are often harder to manipulate. Their decisions are not made impulsively in response to emotional pressure. They create distance between feeling and action. Inside that distance, perception becomes clearer. They notice tone without absorbing it emotionally. They recognize provocation without needing to answer it immediately. And because they are not rushing to protect their ego in every moment, they preserve energy that reactive people waste constantly. There is also something strangely disarming about a person who refuses to become emotionally chaotic under pressure. Others begin questioning their own behavior in comparison. Someone expecting conflict may suddenly feel uncertain when calmness is returned instead. Another person trying to provoke insecurity may begin revealing their own insecurity when no visible reaction appears. Emotional steadiness acts almost like a mirror. It reflects the instability of others back toward them. That reflection creates discomfort because many people unconsciously rely on reactions from others to regulate their own emotional state. When those expected reactions disappear, the interaction begins feeling unfamiliar. Meanwhile, the composed mind remains clear enough to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface, rather than becoming trapped inside the emotion of the moment itself. Over time, this discipline changes more than conversation. It changes identity. A person who no longer reacts impulsively begins trusting themselves differently. Pressure loses some of its control. Criticism loses some of its emotional weight. Even difficult situations become easier to navigate because the mind is no longer collapsing into automatic reaction every time discomfort appears. Calmness stops feeling like performance and starts becoming natural. And once emotional stability becomes part of someone's character, their presence alone begins influencing environments before they even speak. That is why the strongest presence in a room is often the quietest one. Not silent out of fear, but silent because there is no need to prove anything. Their attention remains grounded in observation rather than performance. While others rush emotionally from reaction to reaction, they remain centered enough to choose their responses. And that ability creates a kind of freedom many people spend their lives searching for without ever understanding why it matters deeply. And that sense of calm authority becomes even stronger once the mind stops confusing complexity with intelligence. Modern culture quietly teaches people that sounding complicated makes them appear more capable. So conversations become filled with endless explanations, technical language, and long arguments designed more to impress than to communicate. Many people speak as if difficulty itself proves depth. They stretch simple ideas into exhausting performances because part of them fears that clarity will make them appear ordinary. Yet the opposite is often true. Confused thinking usually creates confused language. A person who fully understands something rarely feels the need to hide behind unnecessary complexity. Their words become simpler because their understanding becomes clearer. This is why some individuals leave a lasting impression after speaking only a few calm sentences, while others talk endlessly and are forgotten almost immediately. The difference is not volume, it is precision. Stoic thinkers respected precision because unnecessary words often reveal unnecessary ego. Someone desperate to appear intelligent usually adds more than the moment requires. More explanations, more details, more effort. Yet that effort quietly exposes insecurity because emotionally grounded people rarely feel pressure to prove their value constantly. They trust clarity enough to let it stand on its own. And strangely, people listen more carefully when they sense that trust. Calm language slows the atmosphere around it. Others stop focusing on performance and begin focusing on meaning instead. Think about the conversations that remain in memory long after they end. Usually, they are not filled with dramatic speeches or endless reasoning. Often, the most powerful statements are direct and almost unsettling in their simplicity. A calm observation, a precise sentence, a few carefully chosen words that somehow reveal more truth than a long explanation ever could. As Plato once wrote, "Wise men speak because they have something to say." This happens because clarity enters the mind more deeply than complexity does. Complicated language forces people to work harder just to follow the surface of what is being said. Clear language reaches something deeper immediately. It creates understanding without resistance, and when understanding arrives clearly, the message tends to remain inside the mind far longer. There is also a psychological shift that happens when someone stops trying to sound impressive. Their energy changes completely. Many people speak quickly because they are afraid of losing attention. They rush through explanations because silence makes them uncomfortable. They overload conversations with information because they fear being misunderstood or underestimated. But calm thinkers understand that urgency weakens influence. The faster someone tries to convince others of their intelligence, the more unstable their presence begins to feel. A composed mind speaks differently. It leaves space between thoughts. It chooses words carefully. It understands that people absorb meaning more deeply when they are not being overwhelmed by unnecessary noise. This does not mean becoming cold or detached. It means respecting the value of attention. Human attention is fragile. Most people lose it because they try to force too much into every interaction. They believe more words create more impact, when often the opposite happens. The mind remembers what feels emotionally clear. That is why short truths often carry more power than long explanations. A simple sentence delivered calmly can redirect an entire conversation because people sense certainty beneath it. Not arrogance, certainty. There is a difference. Arrogance tries to dominate attention aggressively. Certainty does not need to. It remains steady without forcing itself into the center of every moment. Over time, this changes the way others experience your presence entirely. When your words stop sounding rushed or emotionally loaded, people begin listening differently. Silence starts surrounding your sentences in a different way. Others pause before responding because your thoughts feel deliberate instead of impulsive. Even disagreement becomes calmer because emotionally grounded communication reduces unnecessary tension. Most conflict escalates not because people disagree, but because ego enters the interaction and turns understanding into competition. Someone feels the need to win instead of clarify. Another person feels attacked and responds emotionally. Soon, neither side is listening anymore. They are simply protecting identity. Clear communication interrupts that pattern because it removes emotional clutter from the exchange. This is one reason disciplined minds often appear wiser than they actually intend to appear. They are not trying to sound profound constantly. They are simply trying to understand reality clearly enough that unnecessary language falls away naturally. That simplicity creates trust because people can feel the absence of performance. There is no desperate need for validation hiding beneath the conversation. No emotional pressure forcing the interaction forward unnaturally, just calm understanding expressed directly. And in a world filled with constant noise, that kind of clarity feels rare enough to command attention almost immediately. Many individuals spend years collecting information while never learning how to communicate with stillness and precision. They mistake accumulation for understanding. Yet genuine understanding changes behavior before it changes vocabulary. A person who truly sees clearly becomes less emotionally reactive, less eager to dominate conversations, and less dependent on sounding impressive every moment. Their words begin serving meaning instead of ego. That shift may seem subtle externally, but internally it changes the entire relationship someone has with communication itself. The strongest communicators are rarely the ones trying hardest to appear intelligent. They are the ones focused entirely on being understood without distortion. Their attention stays connected to truth instead of performance. And because of that, their words continue echoing quietly inside the minds of others long after the conversation has already ended. And sometimes the strongest words are the ones that never need to be spoken at all. Most people become uncomfortable the moment silence enters a conversation. A pause appears and they immediately rush to fill it. They add more explanation, more emotion, more detail than the situation ever required. The silence begins feeling dangerous to them because silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty exposes how uncomfortable many people are with stillness. So they speak quickly to escape it. They defend themselves before anyone has accused them of anything. They reveal thoughts that would have remained hidden if they had simply allowed the moment to breathe for a few seconds longer. In trying to regain emotional comfort, they quietly surrender control of the interaction without realizing it. A disciplined mind learns something most people never notice. Silence changes the emotional rhythm of a conversation completely. It slows the pace down. It interrupts impulsive reactions. It creates space where observation becomes possible again. Many individuals believe influence comes from speaking constantly, yet people often reveal themselves more clearly during moments when they are trying to escape silence than during moments when they are carefully prepared to speak. The human mind naturally wants resolution. When silence appears unexpectedly, thoughts begin racing internally. Someone starts wondering what the other person is thinking. Did they say too much? Too little? Did something land badly? That uncertainty creates subtle pressure. And while emotionally reactive people rush to relieve that pressure immediately, calm people remain still long enough to understand what the moment is revealing. This is why restraint carries such quiet power. Stoic thinkers valued restraint not because silence itself is magical, but because impulsive speech often weakens clarity. People say things emotionally that they never needed to say at all. They reveal insecurities accidentally. They overcommit to opinions because they feel pressure to respond quickly. Once words leave the mouth, they begin shaping perception, whether intended or not. Calm restraint protects the mind from unnecessary exposure. It allows someone to observe before deciding whether speaking is even necessary. And surprisingly often, silence communicates more confidence than explanation ever could. A person who feels secure internally rarely feels the need to rush into every empty space with noise. There is something psychologically unsettling about someone who remains comfortable inside silence. Most individuals unconsciously expect reactions from others. They expect quick responses, emotional feedback, visible agreement or disagreement. But when a calm pause appears instead, the emotional structure of the interaction changes. The other person begins filling the silence themselves. They explain further, clarify unnecessarily, reveal emotional motivations they were not planning to expose initially. This happens because silence acts almost like pressure against the mind's need for certainty. The longer the silence remains steady, the more emotionally reactive people feel compelled to resolve it. Meanwhile, The composed person continues observing quietly, gathering understanding without forcing the interaction anywhere prematurely. The modern world makes this discipline difficult because constant reaction has become normalized everywhere. People are encouraged to respond instantly to messages, opinions, criticism, and emotional discomfort. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, uncertainty, or lack of confidence, yet many of the strongest minds throughout history understood the value of measured response. They recognized that clarity disappears when emotion rushes to escape discomfort too quickly. A person who cannot tolerate silence usually cannot tolerate deep reflection either, because reflection also requires stillness, and stillness forces the mind to confront itself honestly without distraction. That discomfort explains why so many conversations remain shallow despite endless communication. Most people are not truly listening. They are preparing responses while waiting for their turn to speak again. Silence interrupts that pattern because it forces awareness back into the present moment. Suddenly, the mind cannot rely on automatic reaction as easily. It becomes more conscious of tone, energy, and intention. The interaction slows down enough for observation to deepen, and once observation deepens, understanding becomes possible in ways constant noise never allows. There is also a deeper form of confidence hidden inside restraint. Emotionally reactive people often speak quickly because they fear losing control of how others perceive them. They want reassurance immediately. They want certainty immediately. Calm individuals do not carry the same urgency. They trust themselves enough to allow uncertainty to exist temporarily without panicking internally. That trust changes behavior subtly but powerfully. They become more patient listeners, more deliberate thinkers, less emotionally available to manipulation. Their calmness is not performance. It is the result of no longer needing constant external validation to feel stable internally. Eventually, people begin remembering less about what you said and more about how your presence made them feel. Calm restraint creates an atmosphere that stays in memory because it feels rare in a world addicted to immediate reaction. And the person who remains composed while others lose themselves emotionally often understands the situation more clearly than anyone else in the room. Once the mind becomes calmer, another change begins happening almost unnoticed. Energy stops leaking into places that never deserved it in the first place. Most people move through life reacting to everything around them as if every opinion, disagreement, criticism, or emotional disturbance requires immediate attention. Someone says something disrespectful, and it stays in their mind for hours. A stranger's opinion online changes their mood for the rest of the day. A small conflict becomes a mental replay that repeats itself over and over long after the moment has already passed. Slowly, this constant emotional engagement exhausts them. Not because life itself is unbearable, but because their attention is scattered across too many meaningless battles at once. The mind becomes overcrowded with noise that never should have been allowed to stay there. This realization changes behavior in subtle but powerful ways. Instead of reacting automatically to every challenge, the mind begins asking a quieter question before becoming emotionally involved. Does this actually deserve my energy? Most things do not. Many arguments lead nowhere. Many conflicts exist only to provoke reaction. Many people are not seeking understanding at all. They are seeking emotional control, validation, or attention. Once this becomes clear, emotional restraint stops feeling passive and starts feeling intelligent. Calm individuals are not ignoring reality. They are protecting mental clarity from unnecessary disturbance. That distinction matters deeply because there is a difference between avoidance and discipline. Avoidance fears confrontation. Discipline simply refuses to waste energy carelessly. The average person rarely notices how much mental exhaustion comes from constant emotional stimulation. Endless comparison, endless noise, endless reaction. The mind becomes overloaded not from meaningful effort, but from scattered focus moving in every direction at once. One moment attention is trapped inside anger. The next moment insecurity appears after comparing life to someone else. Then frustration arrives because expectations were not met quickly enough. By the end of the day, the person feels emotionally drained, even though very little meaningful progress was actually made. Their energy disappeared into reactions that changed nothing. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals often seem calmer than others around them. They are not carrying unnecessary emotional weight constantly because they learned how to filter what enters the mind carefully. There is also a deeper confidence hidden inside selective attention. Many people feel compelled to respond to everything because silence makes them feel powerless. If someone criticizes them, they immediately feel the need to defend themselves. If someone misunderstands them, they become desperate to correct every perception. But calm minds understand something important. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every insult deserves response. Not every invitation into conflict deserves acceptance. The need to react constantly usually comes from emotional dependence on external validation. A person who is internally stable does not feel psychologically forced into every emotional exchange. They can let certain things pass without feeling weakened by doing so. Over time, this creates a quieter and sharper mental environment. Situations that once triggered strong emotional reactions begin losing their influence because attention is no longer feeding them constantly. The mind recovers its clarity slowly. Thoughts become more deliberate. Emotional reactions become less automatic. Decisions improve because focus is no longer scattered across dozens of unnecessary emotional battles every day. As Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And perhaps most importantly, peace stops depending entirely on external circumstances, behaving perfectly all the time. That shift changes relationships deeply because emotionally disciplined people stop expecting the world to regulate their internal state constantly. This does not mean becoming indifferent to life or emotionally disconnected from others. It means becoming intentional about where emotional energy is invested. There are moments that deserve full attention. Important relationships, meaningful work, genuine growth, real challenges that strengthen character instead of draining it pointlessly. But when the mind is exhausted from reacting to everything equally, it loses the ability to distinguish what truly matters from what simply demands attention loudly. Calm people protect this distinction carefully because they understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources a human being possesses. The world becomes very different once attention is no longer controlled automatically by distraction and emotional urgency. Many things that once seemed overwhelming begin appearing small and temporary instead. Conflict loses some of its emotional intensity. Comparison loses some of its influence. External noise becomes easier to observe without absorbing internally, and with that clarity comes a kind of quiet strength that other people immediately notice, even if they cannot explain it clearly. Emotionally disciplined individuals often appear grounded because their inner world is no longer being pulled in every direction by every passing disturbance. They learned how to guard their attention carefully, while others unknowingly surrender theirs to anything demanding reaction. But perhaps the final transformation is the most important one of all, because it changes the entire relationship between the mind and the world around it. At a certain point, behavior stops being automatic. Reactions stop appearing on command. The same emotional patterns that once controlled every decision begin losing their influence quietly. Most people never reach this stage because they move through life repeating familiar habits without examining them deeply. The same frustrations trigger the same anger. The same insecurities create the same defensive behavior. The same emotional wounds shape the same decisions again and again until personality itself becomes predictable. And predictable people are easier to influence than they realize because their reactions can be anticipated long before situations even unfold completely. This is why emotionally reactive individuals often feel trapped in cycles they cannot explain clearly. They think different situations keep hurting them, when in reality, the same unconscious reactions keep recreating similar outcomes repeatedly. Someone criticizes them and the ego reacts immediately. Someone withdraws emotionally and fear appears instantly. Someone challenges their authority and anger rises automatically. The external circumstances may change, but the internal pattern remains the same. Over time, these patterns become visible to anyone paying close attention. Friends notice them, co-workers notice them, manipulative people notice them especially. Once another person understands which emotions control you most easily, influencing your behavior becomes much simpler than you might expect. Pressure only needs to be applied in familiar places for predictable reactions to appear again. A disciplined mind begins breaking this cycle slowly, not through emotional numbness, but through awareness strong enough to interrupt unconscious behavior before it takes control. Instead of reacting instantly, the mind starts observing itself carefully in real time. Anger appears, but anger no longer decides the response automatically. Fear appears, but fear no longer controls behavior immediately. Frustration appears, but frustration is no longer treated like an order that must be obeyed. That small separation between emotion and action changes everything because it creates freedom where automatic reaction once existed. Most people believe freedom means doing whatever they feel in the moment. Stoic thinkers understood something deeper. A person controlled by impulse is not free at all. They are being directed constantly by emotional states they never learned to govern. The interesting thing about emotional freedom is that it makes behavior far less predictable without becoming chaotic. Calm individuals are not random, they are deliberate. Sometimes they respond immediately because the moment requires clarity without delay. Other times they remain silent because silence reveals more than reaction would. Sometimes they walk away from arguments, others desperately try to win, because protecting inner stability matters more than satisfying temporary pride. Other times they speak firmly because restraint does not mean weakness. The difference is that every response becomes conscious instead of automatic. And once behavior becomes conscious, manipulation becomes far more difficult. People who rely on emotional pressure often become confused around someone who no longer reacts predictably. Their usual methods stop producing familiar results. Guilt loses influence. Provocation loses influence. Emotional urgency loses influence. They expect anger and receive calmness instead. They expect insecurity and encounter steadiness. They expect emotional chaos and meet patience. This creates uncertainty because emotionally reactive individuals unconsciously depend on predictable reactions from others to maintain control of interactions. When those expected reactions disappear, their confidence weakens. They begin adjusting themselves constantly because they no longer understand how to direct the emotional atmosphere the way they usually do. This is one reason calm people often appear more powerful than they are trying to appear. Their strength does not come from domination. It comes from stability. A stable mind cannot be moved easily by every emotional wave surrounding it. That stability creates clarity under pressure because attention remains grounded in observation instead of becoming consumed by reaction. Most people lose perspective during emotionally intense moments because emotion narrows focus instantly. They stop seeing long-term consequences. They stop understanding the emotional state of others clearly. They become trapped inside the urgency of the present feeling. But a disciplined mind keeps observing even while emotion exists internally. That continued awareness protects judgment from collapsing completely. Over time, life itself begins feeling different because situations that once created emotional turbulence lose much of their power. Criticism still exists, but it no longer controls identity automatically. Conflict still appears, but it no longer dictates behavior impulsively. Pressure still arrives, yet the mind remains steady enough to choose responses carefully instead of reacting blindly. This does not remove difficulty from life. It removes unnecessary suffering created by unconscious reaction, and that distinction changes the quality of everyday experience in ways many people never fully discover. There is also something deeply peaceful about no longer feeling emotionally chained to every external event. Many individuals spend years exhausting themselves trying to control how others behave because they never learned how to control their own internal state first. Their emotional world changes constantly depending on approval, rejection, praise, criticism, attention, or conflict. As Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Calm individuals stop giving the external world that level of authority over their inner life. They still care, they still feel deeply, but their emotional balance no longer collapses every time life becomes uncomfortable or unpredictable. Eventually, clarity itself becomes a form of quiet advantage, stronger than intelligence alone. A clear mind notices opportunities reactive minds overlook. It avoids traps emotional people walk directly into. It preserves energy while others waste theirs constantly on unnecessary emotional battles. And once someone reaches that level of awareness, the world begins responding differently to their presence, because unconscious reactions no longer control the direction of their life. The moment the mind stops reacting unconsciously, life begins changing in ways most people never expect. Clarity replaces noise, patience replaces impulse, and the need to prove yourself slowly disappears because true strength no longer depends on the approval, reactions, or emotions of the world around you. Few people ever reach that level of discipline, but those who do begin moving through life with a calmness that cannot be easily shaken. If this path speaks to something deeper within you, continue with one of the videos on the screen now. Keep training the mind to remain steady in a world that constantly tries to pull it into distraction and reaction. And thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal.